of individuals. Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
Hi there. Welcome to the 33rd episode of A Couple Takes on MS. Hi, this is Dan Digman.
And hi, this is me, Jennifer Digman.
And we are here today to talk to you, asking you a question. And obviously we will talk about it, but just think about this. Does MS define you? We're living with this disease, and so then it's a question of, does the disease define who you are as a person? Jennifer?
That's a really good question, Dan. And I think the first answer would be duh, of course it does. Because look, a couple takes on MS. We're taking on multiple sclerosis, and I don't believe it defines us. But we're doing this radio show talking about MS. 33rd episode of our show. We've talked about it for 33 weeks now. And so I feel like multiple sclerosis does define us as a couple because that's the title of the show. But I don't know if I think it defines me. Does MS define you? Help me out, Dan. Lead me in the right way.
Well, Jennifer, I don't know. As far as like how it defines, I think that's the one thing. It's like because I know if you go online, you look on Facebook, you hear people in discussions with things in the MS community. It's like they say, MS doesn't define me. It's like, what is it, Montel Williams? He kind of, I don't want to say coined the phrase, but that's the first I had ever heard of. It was like, I have MS. MS does not have me. And so it's just like, just say, switch that for the purposes of this discussion to say, MS, say I have MS. MS doesn't define me. But I think there's so much, obviously, for you and me. That's how we met, was because of the multiple sclerosis and because of everything that we do. And I think for all of you out there listening, think about your day-to-day activities and how big of a role does multiple sclerosis play into that which you do.
Well, when you talked about this subject with me briefly before we started talking, we had a brief conversation about it. And I thought, well, geez, Jen, how would you define yourself? First and foremost,
how do you define yourself? Jen, who are you?
I'm a woman.
Okay.
I'm a wife. I'm a friend. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I happen to be using a wheelchair. I think that's pretty big. If somebody met me online and they were going to say, hey Jen, I'll pick you up at the airport, what do you look like? I think your appearance is a big way to define yourself. So then I would have to say I'm in a wheelchair, which would inevitably lead to I have multiple sclerosis. Boy, my voice just got wonky there, sorry. But I have multiple sclerosis, so then would I define myself with that disease? And, I'd like to think that I'm bigger than MS, but, let's be honest, it's a huge component of our lives, those of us living with the disease, and even the caregivers for those others living with MS. I don't think they would define themselves as a caregiver with someone with MS, but, for you, I'm a caregiver for someone with MS, but I also am living with MS, which really isn't a good answer to your question. Sorry.
Well, I'll start over. I'll ask it again.
How would you define yourself? Would you put MS there at the forefront?
I truly would.
And
Which
you
is
wouldn't have a problem with that.
I wouldn't, and I think that that's where boy.
I remember being diagnosed. Granted, that was 20 years ago, and so that was a long time ago. But when I was diagnosed in 97, some people, like I had a good member of my support group, she said, I don't want to tell anyone that I have MS. So she kept that secret. Whereas me, as soon as I was diagnosed, I reached out. I reached out to the National MS Society. I wanted to be involved in a support group. I wanted to find other people living with the disease like me. So I've always been very open about my multiple sclerosis, but I don't know if I really want it to define me.
Well, and it is interesting because if I first meet a person, it's probably the last thing I would tell them about myself.
And that's where
I, as somebody with, if we want to go, and talk about invisible disabilities and stuff, that's where I am at an advantage for being able to hide the fact that I have MS because there's no visual sign. Like you said, if somebody's picking you up at the airport, I mean, you use a wheelchair, and so that's something that's very obvious.
But a number of people, a lot of people use wheelchairs, and maybe they don't lead with, "Hi, I'm Jennifer Digman. I have a spinal cord injury. I got into a really bad car accident," for example. Or, "Hi, I'm Jennifer Digman. I was born with post-polio, and that's why I'm in a wheelchair." Me, I feel that, pretty soon on, I need to say, "Well, hi, I'm Jennifer Digman. I have multiple sclerosis." And I don't know if I'm doing myself a disservice by doing that, or if it addresses the elephant in the room.
I was going to say, you're just waiting for somebody when they keep staring down at your chair, and it's like what they want to ask, but
and they feel uncomfortable. It was interesting when we went to dinner last night. We were out and we saw someone from church, and he was with his grandkids. And the granddaughter just looked at me and she said, "Why are you in that?" And, she's 10 years old, and maybe some people would be shocked by her, to use a word that we both love, her brazenness, just to say, "Why are you in that?" But I thought it was refreshing. Children, they want to know. Instead of staring at me and with her mouth open, she just asked. So that's... I don't know, long way of...
Yeah, but I think that's where, when I say I don't open with the fact that I have MS, I think a lot of times too it's in conversation, it's in the company. I mean, obviously if I'm there on a professional sort of thing for a work-related deal, probably not the first thing I lead with, but obviously, if I'm at an MS event, it's like, I don't want to say you have to throw it out there so build your credibility to say, I have the disease. But I think that's what, as time has gone on, I think I'm more open with just outwardly saying it, because I truly have never been shy about the fact that I have it. But I think, that's where I like to twist. It's like, I don't think that MS defines me, but I lead, or I talk about the fact that I have MS because I'm hoping that I can redefine what MS is. I think that's where, when you're first diagnosed, or you hear things and you hear, obviously there are horror stories. I don't want to make it sound like our life is all roses. Because we have struggles with the disease, and that's I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm not lying in saying that we don't, but it's the fact that we can. It's ways to move beyond the MS, and I think that just to where it's just like I'm redefining, because MS is a challenge, but you still can do things. You still can, whatever it is you're doing, just to show people that MS is not, a
death sentence,
a death sentence,
the worst
or a thing
case
that,
on earth.
Yeah, I think that that's what I'm trying to do. So it's like, so does MS define me? Not necessarily, but it's part of who I am. I mean, the reality is, and I'm just being simplistic now, but it's just like I'm bald. I mean,
Yeah,
I have
that's
no
true.
hair, and that's just, but it doesn't hold me back. But first and foremost, like you, I can say if I'm meeting somebody at the airport, I can say, I'm kind of bald,
Yeah,
because that's a
that's
visual
true.
thing that you can see.
And it makes people know who you are and your level of comfort. Because if you're able to say, I'm bald, then potentially you'll have a sense of humor. You'll be able to recognize that. And it's like me, if I address my wheelchair, I'm hoping to open up the conversation that I'm comfortable with it. But I know what you're talking about because when I was first diagnosed with MS, the idea of a wheelchair was terrifying. It was frightening, and I really thought, oh my goodness, if you end up in a wheelchair, that's the worst thing on earth. And
Was it?
ironic,
Is it?
no, because I met a husband, got a graduate degree. I have a good life, and it's exceeded my expectations of what I thought grown up life would be. But it's interesting. Today I got an email from Healthline, and I think that's an incredible resource. But one of the articles was about how Dr. Terry Walls went from being in a wheelchair to walking again. And that's great for her, but I'm like, if you can't do that, does that mean that my life isn't as
As you
spectacular
don't
as
have a
a
quality life because you're in a
and
wheelchair.
like the goal is to walk. And
Is
that
it?
kind of cheapens my life. I remember being in graduate school with Dr. Primo at CMU, Central Michigan University, and I made the declaration, I am not broken. Yes, I'm in a wheelchair, but I'm not broken. This is something I live with, but I live with it. And I'd like to think I live with it well.
You live with it very well.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. But I'm getting off the topic of MS defining
But
me.
I think that contributes to it. It gives it like a depth to the conversation. I think it's um, because again, it's easy for me to hide the fact that I have it, but that is the. It's interesting. We can say like the elephant in the room, but at the same time, those those wheels, that wheelchair, that's your key to independence.
And it gives me my independence. But again, it's ironic when I have the opportunity to be sitting in an airplane seat or sitting on the couch, excuse me, I kind of left that word unfinished, where someone doesn't realize I use a wheelchair. I'm like everybody else, and I embrace it and I love it. So that's maybe my ongoing struggle with MS defining me. I don't have a problem saying that I have a disease. I don't have a problem with my wheelchair, but I would like you to see me, Jennifer Digman, for a multitude of other things besides my multiple sclerosis and my wheelchair. So maybe on the surface, if you define me as having MS or using a wheelchair, that's okay, but dig a little deeper.
It's
Do you
like,
know what I mean?
yeah, it's like that. It's like a visual thing. It's like just like I'm bald. You've got like brunette, hair that whispers red. I think that's
I think
I mean, those are the things. It's like the visual things that people can pick up. But it's like who's inside and who the person is. Because I think something that I've been dealing with as I'm looking for a job.
yes.
The one thing is, as if you fill out like a formal application and they ask, it's in those like demographic things that they're optional questions. You don't have to answer. It's for terms of like race, gender, age, and ability. And
Yes.
there's like, or do you have a disability? And I remember when I went through the application and it says, well, do I have a disability? And I've never said that I have, I've never felt like I have a disability, but within this listing, it said you have a disability if you have and they listed like all these different diseases. You know, they list, like
Was cancer one
cancer
and
and
epilepsy
autism,
and
yeah,
autism,
and all
yeah.
those things. Then all of a sudden, I'm scrolling down alphabetical lists. I get to multiple sclerosis. Well, how can I deny that? And I think that's where something, because I'm so open about my multiple sclerosis. You know, I have relapsing remitting MS and I have the
Yes.
invisible illness, but we have this radio show, we write a blog, we've written for magazines.
Well,
where
let's be honest. What employer doesn't hop onto Facebook or to Twitter or to Instagram and look at your photos you're sharing, or what ideas or what things interest you? So if an employer looks on Facebook, you'll have to go maybe down 2 pictures before you will see something that Dan is involved with the National Multiple Sclerosis Society.
Well, and that's a point of pride. I mean, that's on my resume, my involvement with the MS Society, and that you and I were inducted into the Volunteer Hall of Fame. I mean, I can't deny that. I can't hide from it. And in many senses, I mark on there that I have multiple sclerosis, and I've said that it's like a point of pride for me that for everything that people think MS is supposed to keep you from doing, I'm thinking, look at everything that I still am doing. So I think on that sense,
And look at all that you are doing because of your multiple
I think
sclerosis.
and I think that's where, I'm not going to deny or shy away from the MS, because I think of all the opportunities that it's provided. I mean, it's been a challenge. It's been difficult, but I think that's just where, we can talk about this another time, just in terms of the attitude and just because it would be very easy, because there's enough that's going wrong with things during the day that I could be very angry and upset about and tired and frustrated. But it's like there's so much more to me and to life than just to let the MS drag me down. If anything, I'm not going to say it lifts me up, as like I'll lift it up as something
and
that
and it can use your lifting it up and defining it. How about that, Dan? Instead of does MS define you, like you said, you define it. Maybe that is all of us MS warriors, those of us living with the disease, or the caregivers. Yes, my spouse has MS, or my neighbor has MS, but it doesn't define him or her, but they define it. We live a life where I don't ever want to say we make MS look good, because I think that cheapens it a little, but we look good while we're having multiple sclerosis.
Yeah, it is. I think, and that's what maybe the charge for everybody out there. It's just like just to you take control in the agency. It's just like, this is my life. I have MS, but this is what I'm doing. And really, in spite of and despite things, I think that's it. I'm a very laid back person, but at the same time, I have a lot of spite for this disease.
Absolutely, and you define it, so it doesn't define you. But yesterday Dan and I went down to Lansing, which is the state capital of Michigan, for MS Day at the Capitol, where we met with our different legislators and got involved in advocacy, which Dan and I have talked about a number of times. But that was our opportunity, and that day I was fine with being defined by multiple sclerosis, because I have my orange on and I want people to know I have MS, and I'm speaking about issues.
Well, and I think that's the big thing, that all of our state and federal legislators,
Excuse me.
that they know us because of our MS, and I'm fine with that. I think, and that's another thing. It's just like, if it weren't for this disease, I probably wouldn't know who my state rep or state senator or federal congressman or senator are, and they wouldn't know me. But because of this disease, I know them, they know me, and it's like So then how can you say that the disease doesn't define it? I don't think it. How about this? It's not necessarily defining. It's just part of who. I don't know.
Well, you're multifaceted, so it's just part of you. But I think it's interesting, we've been talking all this time. And I think maybe does MS define you? We're looking at that like it's a negative.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's not a negative. Does MS define you? Well, yeah, it does. And I'm okay with that. Why do I have to think that that's pejorative to say, oh, I'm defined by my multiple sclerosis? Heck yeah, it defines me. I've been living with the disease for 20 years, so I'm doing the best I can. And like I said, I'm trying to make MS look good. So maybe I need to just embrace the fact that MS does define me. That I am a wife, I am a woman, I am in a wheelchair, and I have MS. And that's like, holy, that's like Breakfast Club in the most simplest terms, most convenient, the convenient definitions. Where a basket case and a criminal. Well, I'm a disease. I'm multiple sclerosis. I could hang with Ali Sheedy and Molly Ringwald in Breakfast
Sure.
Club. I am defined by my disease. Oh my goodness, I just had a light bulb moment there.
But you make a good point. It's just like everyone is so. Well, I don't want to say everyone. That's very generalization and stuff. But it's like more often than not, people seem to want to distance themselves from the disease and make it a negative. Where it's like, obviously, it's not a good. I don't know what my life would be without MS, and it's like I'm afraid to think what my life would be if I didn't have
understand.
multiple sclerosis. But you had made a point earlier today when we were talking about this, and in terms of accessibility and things, and just to where you had made a comment of whether or not it defines you, you use it when you need it.
Yes, I do, because if I'm going to get on an airplane, or if I'm going to stay in a hotel, or heck, if I'm going to get into a restaurant that has a flight of stairs to get into it and no elevator, then I'm gonna pull my multiple sclerosis card out of my purse and say, no, I have MS. I need someone to help me get on the airplane or get into my seat, or I need an elevator. So I feel like if I can pull the card out when I want, I should be able to always be comfortable with MS defining me.
And just when you said that too, in terms of using it when
When
you
it
need
works
it.
for me.
Yeah. And so I guess then, in asking you and asking everyone out there, I mean, think of what's your dominant hand? Are you right-handed or left-handed?
Me, I'm
Yeah.
right-handed.
I am too, and the majority of people are right-handed. Correct. I mean, my
Correct.
brother's left-handed. Made the biggest deal about that when we were growing up, and I always had to sit on his right because for dinner, because if I was eating with my right hand, he'd be eating with his left hand. We'd be knocking
Right.
elbows. So, but my point is, and he's very proud of his left-handedness, and is quick to point out that his daughter and his son are both lefties, and so it's just a question. Being left-handed in the world is sometimes a disadvantage because it's not the regular thing.
Right.
But when you get to, when you start playing baseball, if you're left-handed, that's where you're right for being a first baseman, and that's and pull that out that yes, I'm left-handed, and so it's just like so when you need these things, so you're playing, it's just like this. That's your strength, and when being left-handed is great when a team's looking for a first baseman, you have disability and stuff, so you can use you have to pull that out when you need it.
That's it.
Am I making sense?
Yeah, you're making a ton of sense. But I'm also thinking about my dear friend Amy, and she's Lebanese, and she's left-handed, but she'll be defined by being Lebanese when there's a family picnic, or when there's some good food or something like that, she'll let that define her. But other times, she's defined as a mom of 3 children, or it's like you. Sometimes you're defined as a man living with multiple sclerosis. Sometimes you're defined as a good writer, and I think that's important. Is we don't want to give multiple sclerosis too much of our definition.
And you're right. I mean, just as far as the writer and who we are, so it's just like, so I guess moral of the story, we are looking to redefine what the disease is, but it's like, it's not everything,
It's not
does
everything.
it define, it's part of my definition, if that.
I think that's a really good way of saying it, and that's for anyone who's newly diagnosed. I mean, I would like to say that 20 years after my diagnosis, multiple sclerosis is still a really big part of who I am, but it's not all. And in the beginning, I was scared of it, and now after these 20 years, I'm comfortable to be defined by it, or I'm comfortable to not let it define me. Just depends on the day. And I guess that comes with longer time living with the disease.
And when you become a seasoned veteran and
Seasoned veteran. I'm a saucy seasoned veteran.
amen to that.
Amen. As are you. And so I think MS can define you, or you can define MS. But you just, any way you live with it and you overcome it, or overcome it and you don't overcome it, you just live with it.
And you carry it with you and just, make the best out of every situation that you possibly can. So,
And yes, if you have an idea of how MS defines you or how you define MS, reach out to us. And you can hit us up at Twitter at DanJenDig or on Facebook at Dan and Jennifer Digman.
yep. Actually, just Facebook. I don't know what our Facebook is, but the Dan and Jennifer Digman is for the website.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.
I'm just, we're a team, so I'm just.
Teamwork, absolutely.
All right, but thank you all again for listening. But check in with us. Let us know about whether or not MS defines you and how you're defining MS. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Blue Giraffe Kid for composing the theme music for us. Thanks to the MS&Me Radio Network for making us part of its programming. Again, this is a couple takes on MS. This is Dan Digman.
And Jennifer Digman.
Take care.
Bye-bye.